like even at this point with the size company that we are, 45, like I can't even consume all the information, right? Like we have 6 sales reps doing calls all day. Like I can't listen to 20 hours of calls per day or whatever, right? The amount of data that's being produced is ridiculous. So you need to build systems to manage all of that because you won't scale beyond a certain point.
Yeah, we're recording now. So, the first question I ask everyone that comes on is, how'd you get your job?
My job as the CEO. Well, I was one of the 2 co-founders of the business. I started this business because it was a product that I wanted for the last company that I was running. And it was just kind of scratching my own itch. And essentially, so that business was a marketing agency. We were doing lead gen for consumer finance, doing a lot of advertising campaigns, and we were running 20 different split tests each day on different ad campaigns without getting into the details. And it was a lot of like tracking on spreadsheets and images and Google Drive folders and different variations of copy and making sure that all of those campaigns were uploaded accurately each day without errors on the spreadsheet, without errors in the system, and coordinating that across like a remote team. So that was the first process that I was personally having trouble with in that business. And I was using spreadsheets and email and docs, and I think Asana we were using back then. And all the big problem we have with all those products, there's too much flexibility. So we knew how we wanted the process to run. We had figured out what worked, what made us money, and what didn't work, and what cost us money. And what happened was consistently people were remaking the same mistakes that we knew didn't work and cost us money. We were trying to push people to do the things that we'd already figured out. Sometimes you want to figure things out. You don't know what's going to be the best way and what's not going to be the best way. So maybe you don't want to restrict that flexibility. But in our case, and in lots of other cases, you do want to restrict that flexibility because you figured out a way to do it better. Maybe there's a safety reason to do it in one way versus another. Maybe there's a compliance or legal reason to do it in one way versus another. And you don't want people going off the tracks and experimenting. So lots of in those examples, you want something like a workflow tool or a process management tool. But maybe if you're doing design creative or something, maybe you want more of a flexible tool that allows for more interpretation and experimentation. So that was the product, the process we were trying to solve, and we built the product internally as just for us to manage our own processes, and started showing it to some people and got some really good feedback. So we split out as its own product and kind of went from there. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So when did you start your marketing agency? Was that your first business?
No. My first bit. So I've basically been running remote companies since 2009. My first business was an e-commerce store, Shopify store in Australia in 2009. That was my first full-time business. I'd done a couple of kind of websites as projects on the side while I was working before. So I ran that for a year and a half and sold it, and then did a couple of other projects before landing on the marketing agency. And then I also have a failed startup in there somewhere as well, where we launched a consumer video app back in 2012. Lasted about 12 months and died. So yeah, you could call this business number 4. Yeah.
Okay. And at what point did you move from Perth to San Fran?
From Sydney. I was in Sydney.
You're in Sydney.
I left in 2009. And then I was pretty nomadic, right? Like I only really went to San Francisco once. I'd gone in and out of San Francisco, especially when I did the first startup. But I was living essentially as a digital nomad for 8 of the 10 years, and only really got a place in San Francisco when we raised venture capital and we're trying to scale a much larger business.
So when it comes to kind of the marketing agency, Process Street, how did that become a product, and what happened with the agency?
There was always an idea, like maybe this could be a product, right? There wasn't, when we're building, we're like, well, why would we just build it for us when maybe other people could use it? So there was always that in back of our mind, but it was also like, but if we can't turn it into a product that's valuable for other people, at least it'll be valuable for us, right? So it was kind of that mentality. We made this switch when we got to AngelPad, which is an accelerator kind of like Y Combinator. And so we had released the product as like a beta for people to use for free. And we'd gotten a few hundred companies, I think, using the product for free. And then we used that to apply to AngelPad, the accelerator. And then once we got into AngelPad, which gives you a little bit of money and gives you some validation, that was when we, like through the process of doing AngelPad, that was when we really analyzed the market opportunity and understood that this was the bigger opportunity. And then through that, I just wound down the marketing agency after that. I think I kept running the agency until I closed the seed round for Process Street. So it was kind of like, once I knew there was capital and there was cash to live off Process Street, that was when I went down the marketing agency. Yeah.
When was that? When did you launch Process Street? Because I remember seeing you guys perhaps on Product Hunt, maybe.
Yeah, like 2014 was the beginning, and then it was more like, but then that was the beta. So it was a year and a half in this free version. And then once we raised money and then we built out the product a bit more, we launched the paid version, and that was probably 2016. Yeah.
So yeah, Product Hunt would have been around. You probably launched on their paid version. I remember seeing kind of the blog posts where you could click and you talk about a process, and you could click and then you can go, yep, you can load it into your Process Street, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have the public templates.
Yeah, that's really smart. So fast forward to now, can we talk about kind of traction and how many people use Process Street, or what you can share around kind of the product itself?
Sure. Yeah. So, this is all from our funding announcement, but recently at the beginning of 2020, we closed our Series A, which was led by Excel, Salesforce Ventures, and Atlassian. And we're about a team of 45 people now, and we have more than 400,000, probably close to 500,000 registered users on Process Street. So it's gone well, and had almost more than 500 reviews, really positive feedback from all of our customers. You can check out all that stuff on G2 Crowd or Capterra. Yeah.
The reason that I said to you offline, I wanted you to come on and share with us is, we are working on this incredible course on how to produce systems and processes in your business, which is something that's in demand. But during this time, it's early June that we're chatting, processes and systems have become more important than ever, because during this time, you need to just have everything you and your team are doing, or even, yourself, like you just need to be way more efficient, because where you see inefficiencies in your business, that is profit being lost. And right now, cash is king. You need profit. Like it's the lifeblood of your business. So you shared with me something when we spoke a couple of months ago, where you said to me that, one of Process Street's users said, if it wasn't for Process Street, I don't know what I'd do during this time period. My business would be in a lot of trouble. Why did this person say that?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of customers give us that kind of feedback, which has been really positive. So a couple of things happened. I mean, the big thing that happened to a lot of people in this particular moment was that the shift from work to home, right? Work from home. So a lot of teams that work in the office, they focus on, or you naturally tend to orient around synchronous communication. Things are getting done on the fly. People are dropping into people's desks. People are doing impromptu meetings. People are picking up the phone and calling each other. people don't really work on as structured of calendars. And so that has its benefits. It allows things to move quickly. It requires less process to get stuff done. And that can work well in an office, because when you're in an office, you can communicate to multiple people in parallel, which sounds weird. So like if you're in an office, say you're a sales manager in an office and you manage 5 different sales reps, you can kind of listen to all 5 of them on the phone at once. When someone finishes a call, you can be like, hey, did you do that? Or hey, did you follow up with that person? Or next time ask that. And you can kind of be listening to 4 or 5 people at once. Same kind of thing if you're a manager of a team in an office, maybe you manage a department. You can kind of be there. You can kind of like watch over asynchronously, identify like, oh, an issue's happening there, an issue's happening there, someone's getting up, you can kind of like watch what's going on across the team synchronously, and watch multiple people in parallel. When you're in remote, everything becomes one-to-one, and a lot of things move to asynchronous communication. So for example, you can't listen to the recordings of 5 different sales reps at the same time. You can only listen to one at a time. You also are probably doing individual meetings with all 5 of those reps. So this kind of thing where you're able to kind of, in say 1 hour, kind of review all like calls from everyone in your team. So in like a 1 hour time block as a manager, you can kind of scan 5 reps calls and try and see if there's anything going on, because you're just kind of listening in the background. But if you want to review, say 5 30-minute calls as a remote sales manager, it's 2.5 hours, because you've got to go through each of those calls 30 minutes each. So trying to manage the same way that you do in the office doesn't work when you switch to remote, because these timelines stretch out, and a lot of the things that you're used to doing in parallel and synchronously just don't work anymore. And so a lot of the fact that I've had from not Process Street customers, but like my other friends that are founders and run other startups, is like they're suddenly overwhelmed, like their workday just went up by 3 hours a day, and they don't know why. And as soon as they moved, like when they switched to work from home, because like now a lot of these things that they were running in parallel, they're now stacked into a calendar, and their day is like pushed out longer. So one of the things that we practice, and that's Process Street is naturally very good at enabling, is as a remote organization, is we try and push asynchronous communication as much as possible. And there's lots of tactics for how to communicate better asynchronously. But the idea is that things should be able to happen not in parallel on their own, right? So how do you manage like a sales team asynchronously, for example? You can't just stack listening to calls. So maybe you've got to, if you want to get more intelligent about your call tracking and analysis and listening, maybe you need to deploy a product like Gong or Chorus that allows you to get analytics and insights across all your calls, that allows you to, that automatic scans through calls and identifies calls that are more useful, that allows you to search for keywords inside calls so you flag calls that are useful, that allows you to skip between people talking so you can process a call in 15 minutes instead of 30 minutes. So you kind of got to shift the way that you work to this more asynchronous method of work when you switch to remote. And so Process Street enables asynchronous work, right? So one big part of it is that instead of needing to interact with another human to learn how to do something or get something done, you can interact with Process Street, you can interact with your knowledge base. So people don't need 2 people online at the same time to get something done. You can kind of interact one person with a machine and come back. So stopping all those synchronous interactions throughout the day frees everyone up to be able to kind of have more focused work, control their calendars more. And it allows teams to kind of continue to operate not in like when they're like in the same capacity when they're not in the same room as if they were in the same room, because they're getting a lot of those synchronous benefits, but they're getting it asynchronously. And then on top of that, the kind of evolution of Process Street and what we kind of believe in as the future of process management is we enable a lot of automation. So we kind of believe that automation is the next natural progression from process documentation. Like a lot of the time you write a process document, and that might, in the document, let's just say you're a document for like employee onboarding. So these are the steps that we do for employee onboarding. What happened when we started to analyze a lot of customers' process documents, we realized there were just steps in their documents that we could completely automate. It's like, oh yeah, this step is send a contract, or this step is like send an email, or this step is update the CRM, or this step is like copy a file from here to there. This step is like notify engineering or send engineering an email. This step is like have the manager check this contract and approve it. And so we started looking through the documentation of the processes, and that is the first step, getting it written down. But we're like, why are humans doing a lot of these steps when these can be automated? Big businesses have done this for a long time by building custom code and deploying complicated technology. But in smaller teams and smaller businesses, mostly been reliant on like process documentation to build systems. And so the next kind of phase of that we believe is that how can we take people who are used to just writing down documents and kind of find those steps to process and allow anyone in the organization to automate them. And so that's what a lot of our customers have done. So now when they've switched to this work from home, not only do they have all their institutional knowledge documented, but half their stuff is automated as well, which when you switch to this kind of work from home environment, just makes everything run magically, because a lot of the communication and system changes that make you have made a lot of businesses less efficient in this shift don't hurt you if you have a lot of that built into automation from the beginning, because you don't have to make any changes to the way that you work. Yeah. So it's been an interesting shift for a lot of our customers, I think. But people who already had their processes documented and automated have maybe even seen productivity gains from this change, in that like the work that they do is already streamlined and efficient, and now they're dealing with a lot less bureaucracy and meetings and commute, and so they actually just gained productivity immediately. So yeah, we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah, wow, you blow me away, man. So for people that perhaps don't have much documentation or process in their business, one of the number one things I hear is, I know it's so important, but it seems like so much work. Mm-hmm. Or I know it's so important, but that's the last thing I want to do because that's not fun, or, in less or other words, which I'm sure you come across every day.
Yeah.
What do you have any help tips? What can people do there, man?
So the first step is like identifying if working on processes is even a priority or not. Like one of our values of Process Street is practice prioritization. Prioritization is the most important thing for any small business owner, arguably anyone in doing anything. But if you are not making good revenue and good cash, then optimizing your processes is not probably where you want to focus. You always want to make sure your top of funnel, your revenue generating business is working. And I think a lot of small business owners can get distracted by busy work, whether that's building processes or tweaking the colors on their website, whatever it is, but by doing things that aren't directly generating revenue. Once you've figured out some type of repeatable revenue generation system, then, and you're worrying about how do I scale that? How do I systemize this? How do I either, you kind of like, there's three main objectives that people look at when they're building processes. So it's like, how do I get myself out of this? So maybe I'm working 100 hours a week. How do I get down to 60? How do I set myself up for stability or scale? So how can I put in processes that allow us to take on more customers or hire more employees and won't break the business? Or how can I set a business for an exit? So how can I set up the business so that somebody else can take this business and run it, and they don't need all the stuff in my head to continue to produce the same amounts of profit that I'm currently producing, right? So it's very difficult to sell a business to someone else if you don't have, if you can't give it to someone else and they can and allow them to replicate the same results that you're getting, right? So once you've identified that building processes is important and it's something that you want to work on, so not having time is the biggest objection that we always hear. And so there's two ways that we see do this. One, you either spend money and you dedicate resources to building processes. Generally, you're 50 people plus, or probably much larger for this approach to work well. And that is either you hire someone, or you allocate half of someone's time, or you hire a consultancy or something to build the processes. The other way, that is how we personally do it at Process Street, is we basically push for a culture of process. So we within our organization, so the big problem that you'll find is that it's a lot of work, and putting all that responsibility on one person creates a massive bottleneck. And if you haven't carved out specifically time, if you haven't said, hey, I'm paying you for half your week, and your main job and 20 hours of your week or 40 hours of your week is the right processes. If like they have some other job, like they manage a team, plus you give them extra process work to do, that's going to create a lot of problems. So we try and enable this culture of process where we train and enable everyone in our business to be able to write processes and build automation. So every single person in our company writes process documentation, iterates on the process documentation, and builds automations. So we have like an insanely efficient business because everybody is constantly automating their own work all the time and constantly managing and tracking their processes.
Yeah, wow.
There's all sorts of tactics we do to build that culture of process. But the general idea is that if you try and give it to one person, it's going to create a bottleneck. If you try and kind of say everybody has a little bit of process responsibility, it distributes the effort. Another analogy is like in software, there's kind of like, and this is something we practice as well, but there's like a methodology around like coding with tests. And so like kind of in old school enterprise banks and stuff, they will have like a engineering team and then a test team separate, whether one team will build and one team will write tests. And more modern startups have the engineers both build and write tests. And so it's kind of like a concept, like every feature that you release you need to build a test for it as well. So it's like you're responsible for not just the work, but also the process and the infrastructure and the consistency and the stability of that work for the rest of the business to be able to kind of stand on it, right? And so we do that. So we, so to go through some tactics, we train everyone, right? So we give everybody the power to build and the knowledge to automate processes. We run off like a minimum viable or lean process development model. So when we build processes, we always push the first version as the minimum smallest amount of work that can be done to release a process. So say that could just be as simple as like a 10-step checklist, right? Without any more details or anything else, nothing hooked up, no automations, nothing, just like, this is the very basic key 10 steps that get done. And we just try and get those out as fast as possible. Like there's a big roadblock where people will try and get the process perfect before they release it. And that can make it continue to push out. And then you don't actually get it in production. You're not getting feedback on it. You're not getting value from it. So we try and build that MVP. Let's say it's like, oh, this is how we publish a newsletter, right? And then every time we send a newsletter, we'll run that checklist and we'll allocate an additional 10 minutes of time at the end of the task to improve the process. So if you've gone through and you've sent email and you're following the checklist and you're like, oh, hey, it'd be good if we could, capture the results here, or it'd be good if we could add in a few variations for subjects in here, or it'd be good if we could link to the MailChimp template that we use in here, or like whatever. We can just start to build out the process with more information so that the next time someone runs it, it's faster, it's more efficient, it's more accurate. And you're just continually iterating your processes over time. So it never really kind of becomes a chunk in the calendar, right? Like you're never trying to block out times of people's calendars to dedicate purely on process. Ideally, they're doing things like sending emails that are making money, and then at the same time, they're just slightly making that process better. So they're not kind of not doing revenue generating or other core business activities in exchange for building processes. They're doing both at the same time. One of our values is focus on the process. We have process hack days where we'll have once a month, different teams will do it, but once every month or once every few months, we'll go through and we'll build processes, or we'll just iterate on processes. We do process demos. So like in team all hands, someone will demo a particular process they built or automated or significantly improved, and how does it work? So you're constantly kind of like sharing that process information around the team and around the organization. It's just something we try and kind of integrate deeply into the culture.
Yeah, no, I think that's really smart because at Foundr, we actually tried to outsource it. And exactly what you said happened was that we just outsourced it, and then they did all the work, but then no one used it and no one iterated, and it needs to be ingrained in the culture. And I think it needs to go top down. So if you're not, one thing that I learned is your team are excited around the things that you are excited around, right? And if you're not excited, or if this doesn't look like it's something that's important, then the people don't focus on it, right?
Yeah, like another thing, another kind of cultural approach is I try not to ever blame individuals if anything goes wrong. I try to always blame the process, right? Like, oh, you made a mistake. That's because it wasn't in the process, right? Like if it was in the process, it would be fixed. So let's go fix the process. Like every error comes down to like a responsibility of the process itself. And so then it's like, okay, so that wasn't done right. Was it in the process? No. Why was it in the process? Let's fix it. Or it was in the process. Why didn't you follow the process? So it always just becomes very easy if that always becomes the reason why something is done or isn't done. And that always becomes your kind of point of reference. I find it helps me be more like fair and non-judgmental when I'm dealing with, and like less emotional when I'm dealing with maybe big errors or things that come up. And it also is just a much better solution because you can train one person to not make that mistake time, and you can spend an hour training that one person, or you can spend a one hour improving the process, and then anybody, whoever does that job again, won't make that mistake, right? So if that team grows to 10, your 1 hour of work has gone to train a team of 10 instead of just to train a team of 1, right? So it's a much more efficient use of time. Plus you also get all the other benefits, like you can sell the company and stuff later. Another kind of flag that I have is if somebody so it's the same thing. If something is broken, then I kind of look at like, how can we improve the process or build a process to fix this? But then also if somebody really needs me for something, this is like another thing that happened to a lot of my friends that switched to it, was like, they're like, everyone's constantly hitting me up and I'm like on these calls and I can't do this parallel management, right? If someone urgently needs me for a particular task or something, like, hey, I can't get into this system, or hey, I can't get access to this document, or I don't know how to do this, or I have a question about something, to me, that's always like, oh, my system is broken, right? Like as soon as somebody needs me for something that only I can answer or do, that to me is a huge red flag in my business. And I immediately try to deploy a system so that next time I'm not going to be the bottleneck for that particular problem. So I'm always trying to remove myself out of any situation. And so like problems, things breaking, things getting done incorrectly, things waiting on me, those are all good triggers. It's like, hey, this is a thing that we need a process for that we should improve because work is stopping because of this, right? And we shouldn't ever let work kind of stop. And also, I'm only one person, so I can't scale that much. So if I want to take on new projects and I want to work on it, when I started, and this is a typical founder journey, you do work. So for me, I'm not an engineer. My co-founder is the engineer. So he was running product and engineering, and I was doing sales, and I was doing marketing, and I was doing customer success and ops. And then it's like, if I want to stop doing that work, if I want to do more CEO work, I need to build systems to get myself out of those roles, or I won't be able to, like even at this point with the size company that we are, 45, like I can't even consume all the information, right? Like we have 6 sales reps doing calls all day. Like I can't listen to 20 hours of calls per day or whatever, right? The amount of data that's being produced is ridiculous. So you need to build systems to manage all of that because you won't scale beyond a certain point.
I agree. So I'm curious as well, you talked about like, you don't want any part of the business reliant on one particular person, or no bottlenecks on it with a reliance on a particular person. But what about something like, as an example, like graphic design or media buying, where they're very specialist? You can't, like, how do you document stuff like that? You know what I mean?
Sure. I mean, graphics design, we have a design system, right? Like you can build a design system and a brand style guide that gives you a framework for how design needs to be done. And then you can build out templates for, this is like kind of like our template for blog posts. This is our template for landing pages. So you can build systems to, and like if you think of a designer at Facebook, okay, that's building Facebook groups, like that designer is not coming up with new logos and graphics and margin widths. And like Facebook already has a design system. They're kind of just like building new pages for that design system, right? So that kind of design, you can have a process for. If your design is like, hey, we need to come up with a logo once ever for our company, and then that's going to be our logo forever, that's not a recurring process. So that's not something you would systemize or document anyway. It's a one-time project, right? So that is not something that would ever move into a process. But if you're a design agency and every week you produce a logo for a different client, then you would have a design brainstorming kind of like process for how do you go about coming up with different ideas, delivering to the client, getting the feedback, delivering 2 new variations. And so you would have a process for kind of like, how do we come up with logos when a new client comes in? So it depends on your business and what you're doing and how you'd structure it. But yeah, design agencies have a design process. Yeah. Or design teams in companies that are constantly building products like Facebook or Apple or whatever have a design process. Yeah.
And if you kind of don't have any processes or systems or documentation as of right now, how long would it take to like get your company up to a state where, probably not like how you guys run things, like you guys have it fully embedded, it's part of your values, like hardcore, but like how long would it take, man? Like what is a good estimated time? 3 months, 6 months, 2 months, like
weeks, yeah. Even days. Yeah. So like the first thing is, don't try and get everything perfect, right? Like, so you would say, like, if you have no processes and you want to get to, what's the 20% of work that's going to give you the 80% of results, you want to Pareto it. The 20% of work that you would do is you would pick the 10 most critical processes in the business. Generally, that's like what's closest to the money, what manage, if 80% of the revenue in your business is designing websites for clients, and 80% of revenue comes from designing websites, then probably your website design process is going to be your most important process to build, right? Whatever's that key part of your business. If you're an immigration lawyer, probably your immigration process is going to be your most important process to build. So if you can get that one kind of key process done, or the few processes that relate to that money, that are closest to the money, and just get the MVPs of those processes done. So just get that 50-step checklist, 10-step checklist, just the high level steps of whatever they are. You should be able to, next time you make a website, just kind of keep a document or pattern and pen and just jot down the steps as you're going. Like, it shouldn't actually take you extra time. And then maybe at the end, maybe you take 10, 15 minutes, you kind of organize it and put it in your process sheet or in your doc or whatever. And you've got a basic process done. And then the next time you do it, the next time you build a website, pull up that checklist and then just say, hey, there are any that I missed? Or if I'm like, if you know that you always use InVision, or you always use this particular Google Drive folder, and you're already in there, and so you have your checklist up and you have Google Drive up, just copy the Google Drive link and put it in your checklist, so that next time you've got that there, right? So you're just slowly kind of like building out this, and it shouldn't theoretically take you any extra time. Months and weeks is like nothing, right? Like, you should be able to get that done. If you build a website next week, you should, by the end of next week, also be able to have this checklist built, and it shouldn't take you any extra time out of your day, right? Like the time that it takes you to go get a coffee or whatever, right? So I think that it's very similar to building a website, for example, right? Like, you could spend 6 months building some crazy website and tweak it and make everything perfect and have 1,000 pages on it before you launch. Or you could just have a one-page Shopify site with a template that you build tomorrow, right? Like, the better solution is to get the one-page Shopify site up tomorrow and then iterate it over the next 6 months. Not try and build some 6,000 page site that hopefully maybe you launch, you don't know if people like, or it's useful, or people understand it, right? Like, so it's the same approach. You just move fast and get it done. And I think that the reason people don't do it is the same reason why people spend 6 months on a website before they launch, right? Yeah.
And then when you talk about the minimum viable process and just top level dot points and stuff, what are your thoughts on, video versus implementing a Loom versus like screenshots? What's your take there around like how to best do it, man?
My solution for everything is do whatever is the least amount of work for you, right? Like, because again, it comes back to the biggest problem is people don't do it in the first place. The biggest problem is people don't have time. So I can tell you the best solution is to go hire some video production company and spend $1 million and have perfect thing. Like, sure, best website you can build is go hire Ogilvy, right? And like do some thing, and that's going to theoretically be the best quality product you can build, but it's probably not the best solution for you, right? Based on a cost and time analysis, right? So I think it's about having something that just works for you, works within your own workflow, works within the style of how you like to operate, aligns with the culture of the type of business you're trying to build. If you prefer to talk, if you prefer things to be done visually, maybe Loom. If you prefer to write, if you like writing, if you prefer other people in your team to write and build their processes written, then you should probably do it written. There is no real best answer. The best answer is whatever is the fastest, least amount of work for you. Similar again, it's like if you're trying to build a website and you already know how PHP works, but someone told you JavaScript is better, probably shouldn't go learn JavaScript to build your website. Probably just build it in PHP because like you already know how PHP works and you're going to get it done faster than going back and learning a new skill to begin with. I personally like video, and audio. I, for example, consume all my books in audio. I'm not as big of a written person. So I personally use a lot of Loom and a lot of screenshots, and we have tactics and stuff around that as well. Loom is a modern thing. Pre-Loom, I had Zapier scripts that would just quick time record my screen and drop it into a Google Drive folder and post it into Slack. So I basically built my own no-code Loom right before. And so I like that. But then there are other companies for example, Basecamp and GitLab that are very, very documentation focused. So everything for them is all written. And that a lot of that comes to the culture and the founders, right? So it's just what works for you. I don't think that there's a preference, but a good product like Process Street should support whatever your preferred format is, right? So if you prefer video, we'll support your video. If you prefer text, we'll support your text. Like you can build it in the way that works best for your business. Yeah.
Who should be the owner, right? Like, do you, like, let's just say, you know, you've got 10, 15 people, you don't have an operations manager yet. Is that something typically an ops person would handle and be in charge of before, otherwise it's the CEO? Or
teams should handle their own processes. So if it's a sales process, depending on your organization, it's going to be the sales manager or it's going to be sales ops, or a team lead somewhere probably. If your team is really big, normally, if your team is real big, normally you'll have an ops person. If it's not really big, then you will have a team lead or a manager or like a senior person in the team that becomes the process owner. It's not wise to have an operations team build processes for things that they're not doing day to day. Like it's always better to have the people that are doing the process day to day build it and maintain it, because they're the ones that know how it actually works, and they're the ones constantly interacting with it, and you want them to be able to iterate on it, right? So like if sales has a problem with the process, you don't want to create some loop where they got to go to the operations team and like ask them to make a change. You want them to just be able to fix it and go on straight away, which is that culture of process, or at least have someone else in the sales team that can fix it versus having to go out to a different team. That just will slow everything down. It will create a bottleneck in your ops team, right? And then, at the same time, a lot of the time the operations people just don't know how those processes work, right? Because like they're not closing deals every day, or they're not answering support tickets every day or whatever. They just don't know, right? Like, so you can have them go and interview a support rep and say, hey, how do you answer tickets? Or you just have a support rep record Loom, right? And just don't bother answering tickets and just drop it in your process. I generally like the people who are doing the process to be involved in building it and maintaining it as well. Yeah.
And owning it.
Yeah. Well, owning it would be like some type of senior person in the team will be the owner, right? So you probably don't like a new sales rep that hasn't proven themselves or hit target. Like that's probably not the right person to own a sales process. You want someone who's experienced and has done it successfully and has gone through the mistakes or has the training in it in some capacity. Yeah.
So operations team or person should help facilitate and make sure the machine is running smoothly.
It depends on your business and what operations means. Like in Uber is, for example, operations is like making sure all the drivers and cars work properly. So that's like super important. That's like kind of business operations versus internal operations. So they have all sorts of crazy processes. That's like attached to the money. In Process Street, our operations is just like our human resources and finance teams and just a couple of people, right? And so in Process Street, our operations team only manages the operations processes. So if it has to do with employee onboarding or recruitment, or it has to do with payroll, or it has to do with taxes, then the ops team manages it. That's to do with sales or marketing, then the sales team runs it, or the marketing team runs it, or engineering, the engineering team runs it, right? So they only manage the processes that they're directly responsible for. They don't manage processes that other teams are responsible for. The thing is, there are some ops processes that hit all teams, like HR, right? So they will manage those, but they won't manage the specific sales process. Yeah.
Well, look, we have to work towards wrapping up, man, because I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but this is really, really helpful. Is there any kind of parting words of wisdom that you want to share with anyone watching, listening to this, that perhaps in a difficult time, or they're looking to take their business to the next level?
We did do a webinar on business resilience, but in the end, like, resilience and scale are two sides of the same coin. What you're trying to do is you're trying to build an infrastructure so that when things get messy, everything doesn't collapse on itself. And things can get messy because you're having too many new customers and too many new employees, or things can get messy because you're losing customers and losing employees, right? Like, and for the same reasons, like institutional knowledge is not being shared properly, balls are getting dropped, people don't know what's going on, either because you lost an employee that knew how everything worked, or you gained a new employee who doesn't know how anything works, right? Like either way, like you're kind of, your business is breaking down. And so a lot of companies have gone through that kind of, the second one that I said, where it's like they're losing customers and losing employees, and they're kind of degenerating this kind of realm of chaos and because maybe they have had to let people go, or they're losing revenue and they had to let go of suppliers or agencies they're working with, and things that kind of like were keeping the business going, they're losing these kind of key pieces of it. And so if you had all of that documented and institutionalized and automated, then you wouldn't be feeling the pain of this reorg that may be happening in your business right now. And then the same thing, if you're going through hyperscaling and you have all that in place, then you don't feel the pain from all the new employees that are coming in. But my other big thing is like legitimately, like we run a bunch of surveys, we've talked to thousands of people. Like the main problem is we don't have time to build our processes. And to me, that is just like, it's not a real excuse. It's like, oh, I don't have time to exercise, or I don't have time. Like it's like you kind of have to make time for it to work if you want your business to work in one of those directions. Like if you want your business to scale, if you want to be able to sell it one day, or if you just want to be able to take a 2-month holiday at some point, you have to build the process. It's like, it's not an option, right? Like it's like, if you want your body to be useful to you in 10 years from now, like you have to exercise, right? You have to treat it well. You can't say I don't have time, because in the end, time that you don't give up now will cost you more in the future, right? So the processes have to get done. When I say processes, I'm not even saying like process street processes, but just building infrastructure in your organization that allows it to be more efficient without needing more people, right? And the way that we've figured out with most of our clients who all have the same problem of not having enough time and not having enough resources to build the processes is to try to implement this process of culture, is to try and distribute the, so there isn't a key bottleneck, and is to try and take it in these small chunks so that it's not taking time in the calendar. Like it can be done. Like thousands of other businesses have figured out how to do it. And if you haven't, it's because you haven't figured out how to do it, not because it's not possible, right?
Yeah, love it, man. Thank you so much. And last question, Vinay, is where's the best place people can find out more about Process Street?
Yeah, so you can sign up for Process Street at www.process.st. We have a free version of the account and a trial, so you can kind of sign up and use it for free if you're just a small team. And then we have paid plans above that. And you can also connect with me directly on Twitter or LinkedIn.
Well, look, thank you so much for your time, man. This was an incredible interview. A lot of gold shared, and I learned a ton too. So, yeah, thank you so much, man.
Awesome.
The Founder mission is to help you create an ass-kicking business and help you learn straight from the mouths of world-class founders. Get your free printed edition of Founder Magazine featuring Sir Richard Branson. Just cover shipping and handling at founder.com/Branson.